The silent wall. The house had been quiet for many years. Not the silence of a peaceful morning, but a long-lasting silence, seeping into every wall, every cabinet, every smallest void. The familiar sound of the door opening late each afternoon, the kettle whistling early in the morning, the old radio playing his favorite tunes, all had vanished since the day he left. The living room faced west, where the twilight often brushed past the glass window like a gentle hand. On that wall hung a photograph that had been there for over 30 years. A wedding photo. The walnut frame, once gleaming, was now tarnished and slightly chipped at one corner after a furniture rearrangement. In the photo, he wore a simple gray suit, his hair neatly combed, his smiling eyes reflecting the gentle confidence of a man who had found his home. She, then just over 30, leaned her head against his shoulder, her mouth softly smiling, her eyes sparkling with the pure trust found only in the early years of marriage. They seemed to breathe in unison, sharing the same dream. She had never thought of taking that picture down. For her, it wasn't merely a framed image. It was the only part that still held his warmth in a house that grew emptier each day. It was a reminder that someone had once loved her with all the simplest things. It was a silent testament to a time that had once been vibrant. Every day, she still walked into the living room as if repeating an old habit. The dark blue armchair where he used to read the newspaper remained in its usual spot. The sweater he wore last, she had washed clean, folded neatly, and placed in the drawer he often used. Not to wear again, but to keep it there, like a silent pause. And the photograph. It was still there, in that exact spot, where the evening light passed by every day. As if there had never been a separation. As if time, for some reason, had stopped at that wall.
Days without you. After the quiet funeral passed, she returned to that house alone. No one forced her, no one asked her to. She herself wasn't sure why she chose to stay. Perhaps because there were too many traces of him here. Perhaps because she didn't want all the memories to be packed into some cardboard box and put away in storage. She wanted to live amidst familiar things. She wanted to walk around the kitchen where he used to help her cook in the evenings. She wanted to pass by the wall clock he once painstakingly fixed for an entire afternoon just because it was 3 minutes off. For the first 3 years after he passed away, she lived as if she just had to wait, and he would come back. It wasn't a hopeful wait, but an unconscious anticipation rooted in habit. She didn't change the curtains, didn't move the furniture. She still set the table for two. She still bought 2 loaves of bread for breakfast. And every evening, she sat in the armchair, opened the book he had left unfinished, reading aloud passage by passage, as if he were still sitting somewhere in the room, listening. Outsiders might not understand. Her daughter, calling from another city, her voice choked. "Mom, don't live in memories like that forever." She just smiled softly. "I live with memories, not in them." Because truly, the memories of him didn't make her as sad as people thought. On the contrary, they comforted her. They were a companion in her unexpected loneliness. They were the lingering warmth in a house that was once so warm that no one ever thought it would become so quiet. But time doesn't stop for anyone. And though she held on to every smallest detail, his favorite teacup, his old slippers neatly placed beside the bed, the felt hat hanging by the door, her heart still realized one thing. This house, little by little, was becoming heavy. Not because of sorrow, but because of the prolonged silence. There were afternoons when the sun shone through the window, illuminating the wedding photograph. And she saw in her own eyes, reflected through the glass, something weary. Not from age. Not from missing him. But because she still hadn't stepped out of a time that had closed. The final moment. That afternoon, it rained. A light, early season rain. Not noisy. Not hurried. Falling silently, as if the sky was also grieving with someone. She walked into the living room, holding a dusting cloth. Still her everyday routine. But today, it was different. Different, in a way she couldn't quite name. Perhaps, it was the rain. Perhaps, it was the yellow leaf caught on the windowsill, suddenly evoking a distant memory. She gently wiped the photograph hanging on the wall. The photo that had been there for over 30 years. Her fingertip touched the thin layer of dust on the glass. And for some unknown reason, her heart suddenly tightened. Then she looked straight into her own eyes, reflected in the old glass. A face no longer as it once was. But those eyes were still the eyes of a woman who had once loved with all her heart. And then, in that moment, she knew it was time. Not noisy, not abrupt, just a feeling, quiet yet clear, like the gentle whisper of wind through a half-closed door. She reached out, gently pulling out the nail that held the picture. The frame was a little heavy, the wood old, but she held it with both hands, carefully, as if embracing something very sacred. When the frame left the wall, a dark spot appeared behind it, where the sunlight had never been able to reach. She reached out and touched that dark spot. Cold, smooth, and very real. She placed the frame down on the coffee table. It had been a long time since she had seen it so close. No longer hanging high. Now it was at eye level. So close, she could even see the colors that had faded with the years. And then, she remembered. The final moment. The day he passed away. It was also raining. She sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand. He was too weak to speak anymore. He just looked at her for a long time. His eyes, as if wanting to advise, as if wanting to thank her, as if wanting to apologize. All condensed into a single gaze. She just nodded gently. No tears. Because she understood. True love, in the end, needs few words. After that, she lived in his silence, as if every footstep in the house was a whisper he left behind. Every time she opened the window, a memory was carried back by the wind. Every morning tea was a piece of love, not yet dissolved. And today, as she placed the photograph down, she felt light. Not because she had forgotten, not because there was one less thing to remember, but because she had kept enough. Kept for him, kept for herself, and kept for all the years they had spent together. A new day begins. The next morning, the sun arrived very early. Strangely, after so many days shrouded in clouds, the sky was suddenly clear as if it had never known gloomy days. Gentle light flooded through the window pane, painting long, soft streaks of light on the old tiled floor. The room suddenly seemed to change color. Not entirely because of the sun, but because something within her had changed. She poured a cup of tea. No longer 2 cups, as always, but not sad. Simply a cup of tea for herself. For the first morning, after a very long time, that she woke up feeling she no longer needed to cling. The west wall was now empty. No more picture frame. Just a blank space. And a dark rectangular mark where the photograph had hung for the past 30 years. Before, she once thought she would never be able to bear that emptiness. But today, she looked at it as a beginning. Not a loss, but a gentle reminder. Life is still happening. She walked to the small bookshelf. Her hand glided gently over the old book spines. Many were books he had read, marked with small slips of paper. Hastily jotted notes, a few lines, some excerpts. There was a poetry book. She opened it and saw familiar handwriting. As long as you read with me, I am still alive. She smiled softly. For the first time, after many years, that smile wasn't accompanied by tears. That day, she decided to change a few things. Very small changes, but every detail was meaningful. She took down the heavy dark brown curtains, replacing them with thin white ones. Light streamed in more easily. The wind also passed through more gently. She discarded the old chipped cups and saucers. and replaced them with a set of light blue ceramics, a color she always liked but had put away. Because my husband didn't care for this color. It wasn't erasing him. Never erasing. It was just. She began to make space for herself. For the rest of her life. That afternoon, while tidying the bedside cabinet, she found a letter. An old envelope. His handwriting shaky, probably in his final months. Inside was a piece of paper folded into quarters. The ink was smudged in places. A short message, but enough to make her speechless. If one day you feel ready to take that picture down, know that I'm happy for you. Her hand trembled, but no tears fell. She just sat there for a long time, looking at the words, as if listening to his voice. Warm, gentle, and full of forgiveness. And also that afternoon, for the first time in many years, she was no longer the one left behind. She was the one moving forward, with both old love and new life. The nail on the wall. The small nail was still there, stuck in the west wall, silent like a rest note at the end of a song that had faded. She hadn't removed it yet. Not because she forgot, nor because she was lazy, but simply, she wanted it to stay a little longer, as a way to honor what had just concluded. Every day, passing by the empty wall, she no longer felt a void. On the contrary, that blank space brought a strange tranquility, as if the past had receded to its rightful place. Behind. Not erased. Not denied. Just no longer occupying. Occasionally, she still talked to him. In her head. In her heart. Or simply looked out the window and quietly thought, if he were still here, what would he say? Then she smiled. Because now, she had learned how to answer for him. Not with words, but with the simple actions of each day. She planted another flower bed on the porch. The kind of flower he once said. A bit fragile, but with a strange vitality. Now she saw it too. She was also like that. Fragile, yet still living on. And living meaningfully. She started going out more. Meeting old friends. Joining a painting class she had once been hesitant about. One day, she came home late. A canvas bag slung over her shoulder. A bouquet of wild daisies in her hand, bought from the market. Her elderly neighbor smiled and said, "You look younger lately." She burst out laughing. A laugh, no longer tinged with sadness. Then one afternoon, she took down the nail from the wall. No sound. No ritual. Just a gentle movement. Enough to confirm. The time had come. She hung nothing in its place. No paintings. No photos. She left the wall white. Empty, but not lonely. Because for her, it was the wall of courage. Proof that one can love. One can lose. And then, one can continue to live. More fully. That evening, before turning off the lights, she stood, looking at the wall once more. Not to say goodbye, but to whisper a sentence. "I'm okay now, my dear." And in the silence of the house, she could feel something very gentle, like a lingering warmth, then dissolving, like thin morning mist.